looking at the technological advances. I used to be on dial-up looking for...
So the Mick Foley piece that was dropped on Facebook had me thinking. I mean, do I agree or disagree? Well, there's parts of it that I agree with, if we want to be honest. The talks about WWE creative being absolutely broken, that part is absolutely true. It's been the same way for 30 goddamn years. Even back when Foley was just coming in. There have been countless guys who have come to the WWE with reputations from somewhere else, and Vince changed them. You know, the Bastion Boogers, the Atom Bombs, the Goon, Scanner. I mean, it's just constant, repeated things. And sometimes guys have been able to work their way out of those gimmicks. The Rocky Maivias and the Ringmaster. They're saddled with ridiculous, stupid gimmicks, and they're able to work their way out of it through sheer talent, through changes of direction, through determination, through willpower, etc. They manage to escape it. I mean, it happens, So the conversation about whether creative is broken, I mean, that it is what it is. Now, the NXT call-ups is a different thing, and whether WWE is doing a good job at, quote, recruiting talent or retaining talent, well, that's a different conversation. Let's talk about retaining talent. For starters, we need to take Adam Cole, and now I'm hearing this buzzing about Kevin Owens. Let's take both of them out of it. I hope that Kevin Owens leaves. I mean, if you've been on this channel for a little while, you know that I'm not really a fan of Kevin Owens, though he has his moments. I'm just not really a fan. And to be quite honest, if AEW just wants to be the land of misfit toys, the guys who cut the promo, I don't fit the WWE mold. Those guys who came in and cut that same promo. It's Bryan, it was Punk, it was Owens, it was, some bunch of other guys. But the difference between, Punk and Bryan and all of them, they're all individuals. I'm not saying that it's a group thing. They're individuals. Daniel Bryan is like Kane and Kung Fu. He's wandering the world for the best graps. Everybody likes him. Everybody respects him. Nobody has anything bad to say about Kevin Owens. CM Punk is a completely different ball game from that. And Adam Cole is even different from that. I've said on this channel before, and I fully believe that if Adam Cole was not under contract to WWE when AEW started, he would have been there anyway. Now, that's something they're not going to tell you. He gets to work with his friends. So everybody who's like, well, they just didn't want to give him his Twitch stream. It's like, what are you talking about? His friends are the bosses. His friends are the EVPs. They're going to make him, they have guarantees. Very few people have guarantees on that level. And Kevin Owens, is similar in that situation in so much as he knows these guys. He's friends with these guys. He can get guarantees out of these guys. So, sure. And then plus it's just plain good for him. Kevin Owens is a father. He's a very proud father. He could probably work one day a month, get paid a lot of money, maybe be a great Impact World Champion, him and Adam Cole. They can both be good buddies with the Elite. Everything could be great and fine and nobody will have anything negative to say. I hope it happens. I want the best for those guys. But WWE is not going to lean on these guys who were quite simply Ring of Honor guys who only thing they brought to the table was that they were an attraction for the hardcore wrestling fan. That was really the only attraction to like Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn and those guys. And, Daniel Bryan to a degree before he really got over and became sort of mainstream. Which is why I say Daniel Bryan is different. But, Adam Cole, man, there was nothing WWE could do. His girlfriend works in AEW, and his best friends are the EVPs. Come on. He was leaving no matter what you do. So that conversation shouldn't really even be had. If we saw people that were highly unusual jumping ship, Randy Orton or something like that, then I would say, Mick has an impeachable point about that. But when you look at the guys that WWE have let go, even if some of them their contracts are coming up, I mean, it might have been time for them to go anyway. But we can say that that's a good point. Now, does WWE have a problem recruiting talent? I don't see that they have a problem recruiting talent. The talent pool looks to be pretty good. In fact, WWE has a huge talent pool that they could probably fire 50 more people and still have a pretty healthy roster. So that really didn't apply to me. I didn't really think about that from that perspective that they have a problem retaining talent. And the big issue that I saw that, besides that, is that, well, let's talk about that whole thing before I get deeper into it. Is because people think that these things are a big deal. They're hemorrhaging talent. You don't understand, like, for every one person who takes himself out of the pool, there's probably 5 or 10 people waiting for that spot. That's just kind of how it is. I don't want to have to give people a history lesson about, when Hogan left, how there was a lot of people who wanted that spot. Like, that stuff is pretty obvious. Now, it's a little weird to this generation of fans because some of them are really young, but some of them that are older, they should know better. The moment a guy leaves, he gets fired, he gets injured or something like that, there needs to be somebody to slide right in place. Maybe they're not as over, but they're getting a position that they weren't in before, and they're getting opportunities that they weren't getting before. But WWE tried the opposite already. And that is what they did with the Good Brothers. And then they overpaid them. And then they said to themselves, these guys just don't work. It doesn't work for them here. It's best to let them go. Why go through that repeatedly, paying guys essentially just to stay on contract? There is no reason for it. Kevin Owens isn't your top guy. Daniel Bryan isn't your top guy anymore. Adam Cole could have been, but he was an NXT. He wasn't your top guy anymore. Malachi Black wasn't your top guy. Like, you jumped through hoops to keep your top guy. Vince didn't even jump through hoops to keep Hogan. When he said, the era of Hogan was over, Hogan still had years left. Hogan still had a decade left. But Vince mentally said Hogan was done. Vince mentally said Savage was done. He forced himself to go in that hole. There was a hole that WWE fell into 94, 95, 96, and most of 97, where he was trying his best to stay afloat. He did that to himself because he forced out Hogan. He forced out Savage. He let Flair leave in 92 or 93. He let Flair go, and then he was kind of like, okay, I have to try something different. So that's how we got Lex Luger and we got Bret Hart. They were trying to think with Owen Hart. There were, different Shawn Michaels came out of that camp. Then as this was happening, they signed Steve Austin, they signed The Rock. And then in 98, everything seemed to click. 2 or 3 years into your run, things click. And this is what I was thinking about as I was listening to Mick Foley. Because if you think about it, look at all these guys who were kind of WWE loyalist guys. These were guys who had opportunities to go somewhere else, well, most of them. And they chose not to. When you talk about somebody like Bret Hart, for instance, Bret Hart came to the WWE in 1986 or something like that? Maybe 1984. There were still territories then. And Bret talked about in his book, and he talked about in various interviews how they had nothing for him. He was an underneath guy. He was doing nothing. He was jobbing out. He wanted him to be a cowboy. He didn't want to be a cowboy. It took him forever to find the Hart Foundation. Bret Hart was 35 years old when he finally broke through and won the world title. He had already been under contract for about 6 years at that point. If everybody who wants immediate gratification make me a star right now, we wouldn't have Bret Hart. He would have jumped ship 2 years into his run and went to the AWA or went to the NWA, and we probably wouldn't even be talking about him that much anymore. We probably wouldn't be talking about him at all, if we're being honest. So sometimes you have to push through bullshit. You have to eat shit and wait until somebody finds the right spot for you, the right persona, the right presentation, the right music, and all that kind of stuff. Sometimes that shit takes time. They don't try to rush it either. And when they do try to rush it, sometimes it just backfires. Like the Lex Luger thing. They tried to rush that, it backfired. But when you look at, on average, how long did it take for a guy to really, really, really break through and get over? It takes about 2 or 3 years. So this bleeds into the NXT conversation because the bulk of the WWE audience does not watch NXT. And if you say, like he said, carrying cross, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. It's like, I can understand that sentiment, but now explain why Alexa Bliss is one of the most over women on the roster when they changed her character as soon as she came up to WWE, and she was barely over, and barely even being featured on NXT. Lacey Evans was another one before she got pregnant. They consistently pushed Lacey Evans. She was not really over or doing anything when she was in NXT. Becky Lynch wasn't really over, wasn't really doing anything in NXT. I mean, she was popular, right? But she was also a leprechaun for most of her time in NXT. Is that really what you wanted? You wanted steampunk Becky Lynch to be a top guy? A top girl, rather? Like, people were kind of like, It took, part of what made Becky Lynch work was the struggle that she went through. And people don't understand, that's a very, very invaluable piece of success in WWE, is people being able to see your struggle and experience it. Big E talked about that. That people don't relate to you when you seems to get a top spot just by existing. People don't really relate to you. They don't really gravitate towards you. But when they seen your struggle, they seen the ups and the downs, and they finally say, okay, it looks like something's going to happen here. That's when the connection clicks. Now, it shouldn't take 10 years like it did with Kofi or, with Big E. It shouldn't take 10 years. That's a little too long. I can agree with that. But Bianca Belair didn't win the NXT title. Her first year on the main roster, she main evented WrestleMania. I don't think that you should probably shouldn't, say that, look at what they're doing to the NXT talents. It's like, yeah, I mean, there's going to be ups and downs. There's going to be Aleister Blacks that didn't work. Ricochets who didn't work. Ricochet doesn't work a style Vince likes anyway. But for every one of those, you're going to have a surprising Baron Corbin, a surprising Elias, somebody who comes out of nowhere that they find is dynamic and can do different things. And just because they don't push the people that you think they should be pushing, doesn't mean that the system doesn't work. Baron Corbin has been a consistent top guy for WWE for a while. Even when he was dressed like an Applebee's waiter, when he was broke ass Corbin, now that he's happy Corbin, they've been able to find new ways to make him interesting and to do different things with him. Like, he was a guy that I remember, both him and Elias, being guys that used to get dumped on every week on NXT. And I used to listen to, back in the days, Solid Monster Sounds Off, used to tear into, like, Elias. He used to say, the drifter needs to drift away, and all this kind of stuff. He's boring. He sucks. And what happened? Vince saw a guy with a guitar, and now Elias was more over than Kevin Owens was. He is the one who got that huge reaction. And that, what town that was, and he got that huge reaction. That was Elias. A guy that the internet wrestling fans wanted fired because he can't have 5-star matches. When you realize WWE doesn't give a fuck about 5-star matches, this thing becomes a lot easier to clear up. NXT, success in NXT should not guarantee success on the main roster. It's two different things. Now, that's NXT's fault because of the way that they're putting it together, the shows. They're relying a little too heavily on in-ring work instead of building characters, and then trying to make those characters appeal to people on a larger stage. Now, Rhea Ripley is another one. Rhea Ripley, they brought her up. They did something very interesting in so much as they had her challenge Charlotte at WrestleMania. She ended up losing. But then the next year at WrestleMania, she won the title. So it's a different situation for everybody. Yeah, Nakamura didn't work, but Bianca Belair did. Sure, Aleister Black didn't work, Alexa Bliss did. And that's just kind of toggle the up and down of this situation. You can't guarantee anybody's success. It just doesn't work that way. And it's ridiculous to think so. So I don't know if the NXT system is broken. I can agree that we probably shouldn't change so many characters and change them so often and change them so much. I can agree with that. But at the same time, I say, if they're doing what they're doing, genuinely out of a way to make them more appealing to an audience that has never seen them before, then go for it. I say go for it. Go for it, because if it doesn't work, you can always change course. That's the thing about wrestling. You can always change course. You can always go in a different direction if what you're doing doesn't work. When you get Die Rocky Die, you turn it into a character. You turn it into a persona. You do something else with it. When you get the Ringmaster and you put him with Ted DiBiase and then Ted DiBiase decides he wants to jump ship, you turn it into a storyline. That's the thing that WWE is missing. It's that creative no longer uses the things that are thrown at them. They try to force the issue, try to force you to like or dislike somebody, instead of just rolling with the punches and seeing like, okay, people are giving this a strong reaction one way or the other. Let's just roll with it and see where it goes. That's really the main problem. Now, when it comes to recruiting talent, and Mick says, well, if I was a young wrestler, I don't know if I would leave my career in the hands of WWE creative as it is right now. And I respect that opinion. I would say this. We need to normalize wrestlers going somewhere else. Look, wrestling is like most other jobs. At 19, you're not worth anything. At 22, you're not really worth anything. You're worth something when you're older, when you got more experience, when your name means something, when you work TV, when you worked pay-per-views, when you've drawn money, you've sold t-shirts, you do all that kind of stuff, then yeah, you should probably go to WWE then, because now you have some equity, you have some leverage too. You have equity, you have leverage, you can go in there, kind of carve out your own little niche for WWE. And really, the guys who become top guys, that's really how it goes. You go to WWE with some leverage and you start carving out deals that are different from the deals everybody else has. So when Brock gets to do, the Jimmy John spots or whatever, when he used to do that stuff and people were kind of pissed about it, it's like Brock had leverage. He was a UFC heavyweight champion. He was a top draw. Of course, Vince is going to bend the rules for him. Of course, Vince is going to bend the rules when you have leverage. That's a key of negotiation. Too many people don't have any leverage when they go to talk to Vince. They go to talk to Vince with their hat in their hand, like, boss, can I please get some more money? And he's like, sure, but you're going to go sit in catering because I don't know what else to do with you. You have no ideas. You're not working out. Nothing works. We don't know what to do. We'll pay you, I guess, but that's it. But if you got leverage, then not only will Vince notice that, but he will bend the rules for you. And Daniel Bryan even said it, like, hey, he had leverage. He went in there and said, I want to work in New Japan. And Vince was kind of like, I don't normally do this, but for you, I'll consider it. You have leverage. When you're young, you have no leverage. You're just showing up, wanting to work, and that's the best way to be. You should go and want to work and do as much as you possibly can. That's why you need to work somewhere else. Because WWE, you can get a job, you can go work in the PC, and you can work NXT, but there's no guarantee you're not going to go anywhere. On the flip side, unless you're connected, going to AEW ain't going to do you any good either. This loops back to what I said at first. A lot of the guys who are getting positions in AEW are people who are politically connected. And that include the Lucha Brothers, who are connected through Conan, who has relationships with Tony Khan. He has conversations with Tony Khan. So sure, there's people who are connected in that way, that they can help their buddies. Not everybody is going to be Adam Cole or Kevin Owens or Daniel Bryan or CM Punk or whatever, who comes in with either a big name or comes in with connections. That's not going to be everybody's story. You can look at AEW Dark right now at a lot of people who have been there for a long time. And you could probably count on one hand how many matches they've had on Dynamite. Does anybody remember the name Shawn Dean? The Captain Shawn Dean? I saw a picture of him. I feel like he's still there. I didn't even know he still worked at AEW. He had been showing up at those crazy paid per appearance fees. He's been doing that shit for over a year. Fuego del Sol. He was another one. He only got a job because he's Sammy Guevara's friend. And Sammy Guevara is, of course, one of Chris Jericho's boys. Now, if you're Darby Allin and you're MJF, yes, it looks bad that you did a job on the biggest pay-per-view that they've ever done. But you're connected. Darby Allin is liked by Punk and Sting and Tony Khan. They're not gonna let him fail. They're not gonna let MJF fail. He's a Jericho guy. They know what they got with him. But there's a ton of other talent, especially female talent, on that roster who, for the likes of them, they cannot get on TV. For a while, there was somebody that was keeping track of how long it took for Ty Conti to have another match on television. It took about 4 months. maybe 5. As I speak and have this conversation with you guys right now, Andrade has had 1 match, and he's been on this roster for 90 days. This is the same shit he left WWE for. And now he's constantly hearing about new guys coming in. Look at Pac. He was another one, right? How many matches have Pac had on TV? Very, very few. Very, very few. So while people say, WWE wastes talent, it's like, yeah, but at least WWE pushes some of the guys that they have. AEW is trying to replace their entire roster. That's the point of all of these signings and all of this week where we're contract watching for all the propaganda sites. The point of all this stuff is they're trying to replace AEW's entire roster. So that means I'll say it again, if you sign to this company at 2019, you're probably fucked right now. You're probably looking back and saying to yourself, I'm never going to get on TV. When am I ever going to get to wrestle on TV? And if you do, you're probably going to be on a short match or a job match. If you're look at Brian Cage, he came in with much hoopla. What are they doing, Brian Cage? Little to nothing. What about Ricky Starks? Little to nothing. When was the last time Ricky Starks wrestled on TV? It was probably like a month ago. Powerhouse Hobbs, some guy told me, well, Hobbs is the future. He's going to be a star. I'm like, Hobbs has had 1 match on TV probably this whole year. If he's had more than 1, I'd be surprised. And I don't count the YouTube shows. Those don't even count. That would be like me talking about, Joe Gacy being one of the most shown wrestlers in WWE. And you're like, who? I'm like, he's on 205 Live. It's like, who the hell cares he was on 205 Live? Who cares if he was on Dark and Dark Elevation? There's people who are not even under contract that is on Dark and Dark Elevation. It doesn't mean anything. All this Forbidden Door stuff is taking up spots for people. All these contract, we got to sign this guy. I mean, he's a complete no-brainer. So for everybody who's like, if you're a young talent, do you really want to go to AEW? Where are they going to give you a shot? They give certain people a chance. Daniel Garcia was a young guy who's getting a chance, but I'm not quite sure how he's connected yet. Because something tells me he's connected somehow. Because there's a lot of other people on those rosters who have been there for a long time, and they don't get any chances at all. So a lot of what Mick Foley said was valid. I will give it some validity. The idea that WWE isn't the place to go. It's like, well, there's a lot of people who came to grips with pretty early in their careers, or maybe even pretty late, that they were never going to make it. I was reading a book about, I think it was Lufisto. She was in a book. There were some other ones, especially women, who say, that they hit a certain age and was just kind of like, I'm never going to make it. Forget about it. I'm just going to become like this indie legend, and that's okay. That's why I say normalize going to NWA, normalize going to Impact, normalize doing something else instead of relying on the NXT job or relying on, at least I get to pick up some dates on Dark. It's like, no, go somewhere where you're going to be valued, where you can provide some stability for yourself and your family, and you can take care of yourself. Why sit back and rely on Vince McMahon or Tony Khan? You're an independent contractor. Go do your thing. Now I understand some people want the stability, because if you're not working, you're not getting paid. At least in WWE, if you don't work, at least you get paid. Catering at least pays. That's why so many people don't care. So some people don't care. And the same thing with AEW. There's some people on the roster, they get paid and they don't show up to work at all. You'd be surprised to see them. You forgot they were even working there. FTR, for instance. Santana and Ortiz, for instance. It wasn't until recently those guys even showed up on television. Or at least had matches. Let's be, because they used to cut promos. But they weren't really having too many matches. Especially matches that revolved around them and built up them and talked about them. But for over a year, AEW has tried to treat everybody who came in the door as a superstar. And now they're slowly but surely trying to phase all those people out. The Butcher and the Blade, Joey Janela, the Dark Order, all those guys. And to a degree, even Hangman Page. They've been trying to phase out a lot of these guys. They replaced them with, Guys who are, from 2007 Ring of Honor, like CM Punk and Daniel Bryan, they're trying to get Kevin Owens and Adam Cole and all these guys. Eventually, you have to say AEW isn't much better. They're almost, they've gotten there a lot faster than WWE has. When it comes to wasting talent, AEW got there pretty fast. So I really don't want to hear this. I think that a lot of it is red meat for the wrestling journalists because they picked it up and they blown it up and they treat it because it's validation for them. And when people feel validated, they take it and run with it. When people say the same things about AEW, they're like, no, AEW is going to be great. They need all the talent they can get. Meanwhile, they're not even talking about the matches themselves. They're just talking about the possibility of more matches that could possibly happen at some point in the future. It became an immediate thing. I hate to beat the dead horse, but for fuck's sake, Andrade was barely in the company when Malachi Black showed up. And it wasn't too long after Malachi Black showed up, they just started talking about CM Punk. And then right after CM Punk signed, everybody chanting yes, yes, yes. And then literally 3 days after Daniel Bryan, they're talking about Kevin Owens. Most of these guys didn't even get to have their first match yet. And they're already jumping from one guy to the next guy, to the next guy, to the next guy, to the next guy. That's the kind of stuff that they're doing. Their fan base is just, again, they're Tyrone Biggums. They're just scratching, constantly looking for new talent to pop for. They're chasing the pop. That's not how you book a show. People don't even care about these shows anymore. All they care about is moments. They're trying to capture moments, lightning in the bottle, chasing the pop. I want to be there when so-and-so shows up. Not I want to see this match, or, you know what, this would be really cool if we can book this match. It's just so much fantasy booking, and we just want to have these guys on our side. I even saw somebody who said, just give us all our indie guys back. That was what he said. And I said, you have no idea how somebody like me would love for you to have all your indie guys back. Your Ricochets, your Kevin Owens, your Sami Zayns. Get them all the fuck out of here. Because I really didn't like most of those guys anyway. I find some talent and some entertainment in them, but they're not my kind of guys. I know who they are. They're indie guys. They want to go work indie and do indie shit. So please go away and do it. But let's not act like this is some type of indictment on WWE. They're not having problems recruiting. Did you see all of those people at the tryout? It looked like WWE has a problem finding talent. No, I don't know why Foley would say that. They don't have a problem finding talent. They have a problem using talent. They don't have a problem finding it. There's always going to be people showing up to WWE that say, hey, I want to sign up. They might be younger, they might be older, they might be an indie talent, they might not. They're never going to have that problem. Now, if you're going to say, like, that's not going to be the destination anymore. So, I prefer it that way too. I would prefer it if they weren't that way. I would prefer it if guys went out and found their own stardom. Therefore, when you do come to WWE, I can say, I saw that dude in Impact. He's pretty fucking good. And other than, I don't know who this guy is. I have to sit here and watch him fiddle fuck around in the kiddie pool of NXT and try to find his way. That can be fun too. There's some interest there. But I would much rather you go and do that somewhere else. So I love and respect Mick Foley. He was one of my favorite wrestlers when I was a kid. But he's a prisoner of the moment. I don't think he's fully analyzing the situation. I think Foley likes to keep WWE on his toes, and he likes being a fan. He's a fan just like everybody else. But I don't think he's fully analyzing the situation. And I don't think most people are either. I think if you look at AEW All Out, if you take out the big surprises, what was that show? Old guy CM Punk beats young guy Darby Allin. Old guy Jericho beats young guy MJF. Old ass Big Show that nobody wanted to see in WWE, he's still there. Old ass Christian is there in a main event spot. A bad battle royal and a couple of cool opening matches. That was pretty much the show. But the show was elevated because there were some big quote-unquote surprises. Deep in your heart, I'm right. Stop being a prisoner of the moment. It's okay to respect Mick Foley. It's okay to agree with them. But I don't. I don't think much has changed. I think that, if anything, these people leaving is going to make WWE stronger because the people who were there Going to get fresh and new opportunities, and the fans are going to get to see new people and new spots do new stuff, even if they've been around for a while. We may get to see an increase in like Apollo Crews or something like that because Kevin Owens is gone. Guess what? I'm fine with that. Even if maybe it's Grand Metalik, maybe it's somebody else. I don't know, and that's what makes it interesting for me. Sometimes these guys have to take themselves out of the pool. Sometimes they quit. Sometimes they retire. Sometimes they get injured. If AEW is going to be the one that's going to, quote, revolutionize WWE by taking people out of that talent pool, I'm all for it. I'm 100% for it. Because guess what? Most of the top guys in WWE they can afford to remove them. Just think about how fresh the main event scene would be if certain people who have been in this spot for a long time got taken out. So I don't see this as a problem.